This is Easter Island. It looks eerily similar to what is found in Cusco. It was actually Thor Heyerdahl who was the first person to theorize that there was some kind of link or contact between the two places, the west coast of Peru and Easter Island, sometime in the distant past. And he was emphatic that the Polynesians couldn't have shaped at least this wall. And what we're starting to think is that it's a remnant of a much older maritime culture that existed prior to the Polynesians, because Easter Island would have been strategic for any maritime people. It would have been a place that you would stop in order to get water supplies and food, etc. So it's just kind of logical that the Pacific has been navigated for thousands of years. It's more or less European arrogance to think that that Europeans were the first ones to circumnavigate the planet. So this, again, back in Cusco, like I was saying, this is most likely the recycling of a much older structure. And this is probably Inca, because the Spanish, again, brought concrete with them, so, or the concept of concrete. So most of what colonial Cusco and Peru would have been concrete, used concrete as mortar. This is probably the finest example of Inca building, because this could have been achieved with stone hammers and possibly bronze chisels. The fit isn't super tight, but it is, it's decent workmanship. But this is what we see more and more of, is the fact that we know specifically that this building was built in the 15th century by the Inca, prior to the Spanish arriving. Because it was the birthplace of one of the most famous of the High Inca, called Pachacutec. And the most intriguing thing about this is, if you look at the left side and the right side, you see these very tight-fitting stones, but on the inside you see it's rubble fill. It's all like mud and clay. So what we think is that that was an Inca attempt to replicate the look of the older mask builders, as almost like a veneer. And this is another example. You see the front of the stone wall is, it looks quite tightly put together, but when you look in behind it, it's like a pie shape, and that's because it's easy to make the front look really good, but in order to achieve having the, the joinery go straight through the wall, that would require at least 100 times as much effort. And this is an example of that effort. This is, again, the interior of the Coricancha. This wall is more than 3 feet thick. You can't fit a human hair anywhere along that seam. And the breakage on the right-hand side, that could be during the Spanish period, or it could have been some kind of ancient catastrophe a lot farther back in time than that. But the good thing for us is that the break in the wall reveals the interior, and by seeing the interior, we see that that fine joinery is not veneer, it goes right through. This is the famous Sacsayhuaman, which is above Cusco, the largest megalithic stones, as far as I know, at least in South America, if not the Americas. Some of them, the largest, are approximately 125 tons. And that's me standing next to one, just as an example. That stone is 27 feet tall and weighs 125 tons, and 12 feet of it is underground. So that's how strong the foundation was made, by burying a lot of the large stones into the ground. So that wall has not moved for God knows how long, even though Cusco was very prone to earthquakes. This is on the right-hand side of that wall, and it's a series of so-called steps, but you see the fineness of the craftsmanship. It's almost as though someone took some kind of saw and was able to cut sections out of it. The thing is that we can't find any tool marks, and that would have been impossible with bronze chisels and stone hammers. And what it does is it actually points to this sacred mountain for some reason. So there could be some kind of spiritual connection between these ancient megalithic builders and the natural phenomena. And what we also find at Sacsayhuaman and all over the Sacred Valley of Peru are these odd-looking stones with these big chunks taken out of them. The amount of weathering on that stone, it would have taken much more than 500 years to produce, or even 800 probably years to produce that kind of weathering pattern, because this is, again, is very hard to andesite stone. So what we think is these are, again, remnants of a much older, highly evolved culture. And this is in the same area. It's called the Chincana. And as you can see with the human figures on top of it, it's it's much larger than the size of a house. And you can see all of the so-called stairways and cutouts that are in it. That's more of a close-up of it. A lot of the stairways don't seem to really go anywhere. And that's the back side of it, with all these interesting cutouts. It almost looks like dough or clay, the way that it's been sculpted. But again, the hardness of the stone is about 7 on the scale of 10 of hardness. And that is what those so-called, these are referred to as, anytime you find a flat surface like that, it's called an Inca throne. And so there are several thousand of them. So the Inca were obviously sitting down a lot, joking of course, but if these were Inca thrones, then why did they face this wall, which is only about 20 feet away? This wall is a series of Andeni terraces, probably built by the Inca much later than the original stone in the previous photos. And this is interesting because it's on the back side, and it's a massive chunk of stone that's snapped off and fallen. It has the impression of an inside staircase built into it. And interestingly enough, this giant slab is on top of the opening of a tunnel. And I know people who have been in the tunnel. It's been blocked off by the government. But the tunnel itself has 160 stairs that go in solid stone that go straight down. And then the tunnel continues on and goes 2 miles into the city and underneath the city of Cusco and winds up underneath the Coricancha building. This is another interesting outcrop in the area. You can see again the sculpting of the surfaces, attributed to the Inca, but highly unlikely. This is the opening of one of 2 caves. This is the cave of the so-called cave of the sun. There's also the cave of the moon, and the interior surfaces are very well sculpted and almost polished. The question is, has this been vitrified by heat? Like, has heat been used to produce this glossy surface? Or is it polished or what? Nobody can really explain what technology was used in order to achieve it. And that's just another photo of the interior of this. This is the Cave of the Moon. And there's this platform inside, deep inside of it, going in about 20 feet, and just to give you a sense of scale, that fit about 4 or 5 people lying down on it. There's a hole in the roof that allows light to come down onto the surface. And also nearby, this is called Kenko, and it's almost like a labyrinth that is most likely natural, but was shaped by the hands of someone in the distant past. That's another shot of the giant Kenko sculpted stone, which has 2 passageways in it. One is on the surface, and the other one is underground. And this is part of the underground aspect. Again, this is called, like a throne or something, but nobody knows who made it originally or what its original purpose was. And this is a site that not many people see because it's in a cave in the Sacred Valley of Peru, quite difficult to get to, but it's one of the finest examples of ancient sculpting. You have this stone, and this stone faces this. which eerily looks like something you might find in Egypt. It's a double doorway that doesn't go anywhere, and the workmanship is quite fine. So the question is, who made this, when, and why? And that's more of a close-up of what it looks like with graffiti, which fortunately in the last year has been removed. And that gives you the detail of the workmanship. It's not as though someone had laser beams to do it, but it was a hell of a lot of work to get this done. And this is a similar looking shape to the one back here, to that one. It's a multi-stepped symbol. It actually has 3 levels. So you have this step pattern. In Inca philosophy, it's regarded as representing the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious mind. But this structure stands, or this shape, doesn't fit in with anything else in the area, because everything else, like you can see in the background, you see a stone wall with a lot of mortar, and then on the right side you see additions of stone, but not the refined workmanship of this. So we suspect that this thing is much, much older than anything else, and it's at a site called Ollantaytambo. And this is the symbol, the Incas, one of the Inca symbols called the Chincana, or Chacana. And you can see if you look at the top half of it, that it looks very much like what that is. The thing is, the Chacana symbol is at least 5,000 years old, because it's been found at sites that have been carbon dated at 5,000 years. And the Chicana is a very complex symbol. Some of the most profound symbols found all over the planet are very simple initially to look at, but when you start to count the numbers and look at the relationship of the different shapes, it carries on multiple meanings. You have things like, the 4 directions, energy, space, matter, time, the 4 seasons. The sacred number 4 shows up over and over again, and this symbol would be a lecture by itself, just because of the profound aspects that you can think of when you really analyze it. One of the oddest aspects is that there is a road called the Capacnan. You can see going from southeast to northwest. And when you superimpose the Chicana onto the location of Cusco, which is in the center of that geometric symbol, all or most of the most incredible sacred sites in Peru and Bolivia fit on that line. It's called the Path of Viracocha. So you can see that Cusco's on it, Tiwanaku's on it, on the bottom, Potosi, which was and is a mountain of silver, like literally a mountain of silver. It's at the bottom, and Cajamarca is at the top. And the legend or story says that these ancient people, called the Viracochans, traveled along this line as teachers. And by the time they reached the Pacific Ocean up near Ecuador, then they disappeared and never came back. They were supposedly very tall people, very light-skinned, and had large beards. So clearly they weren't Native American. The question is, who were they? And at this point, nobody really knows. This is Ollantaytambo, which is one of the largest sites in the Americas. You can tell by the size of the ant-like people as compared to the steps. It is far more complex in composition than Machu Picchu is. Machu Picchu, though, it's a beautiful and profound site. Ollantaytambo, to the investigator, anyone looking at the geology, engineering, etc., is far more complicated than Machu Picchu is. And again, this gives you a sense of scale. What you're looking at in the foreground are these massive andene terraces. They average about 8 feet tall, and that is definitely Inca period. We can tell that, again, because we have the clay mortar used as the cement, but it's what's in the background and above it, which is quite profound. And funnily enough, the men's room at Tambo, 99.9% of the people who go to the men's room walk past this ancient sculpted surface without having a clue that they're looking at something very, from great antiquity. But this is the really interesting part, or one of the interesting parts of Ollantaytambo. Again, you see this polygonal construction, and you see how well tight-fitting that stone is. The other thing about it is that all of that stone comes from the mountain in behind, quite high up on the mountain. There's a quarry which is still, you can visit to this day. So somehow the stone, which is granite, hard granite, was moved from the top of that mountain down into the valley, across the river, and up onto the site of Ollantaytambo. And above the polygonal wall, you see these massive pink-colored stones, and that is from the same quarry. And in terms of sense of scale, some of these are, and I've measured them. Some researchers like to bullshit you in terms of how big things are. They'll say hundreds of tons. Some of these are, I've measured them, they are 40 tons, which is a lot. And there's this shaped surface up on top where that massive block is. And they are, I think, sculpted seats. So the question is, you look at that and you say, that's a lot of work. So if you're sitting in the chair, or one of those two chairs, what are you looking at? And it looks over to this. It might be hard for you to make out. But that is the profile of a human or humanoid about 500 feet tall. You can kind of make out where the eye is and where the mouth is. I think there was a nose, but it broke off. It could be natural, but there seems to be a fang in the mouth, and the eye seems to have a vertical slit, which would have been the pupil. I think I have pictures of that, from pulled back so you can get a better idea. But this, again, is on top, the so-called Sun Temple. And again, you see the scale of the stones, and the fact that they were quite masterfully shaped. The rubble underneath it, I believe, is what the Inca did afterwards when they discovered the Sun Temple. Out of admiration for the ancient builders, they probably shoved that stone underneath it to make sure that it wouldn't move. And again, these are some of the big blocks. That was me and the crew filming Ancient Aliens about 1.5 years ago on location at the Sun Temple. This is what is called a keystone cut again. It's something cut into the surface in order to pour bronze to make a clasp to hold two stones together. The thing is that Ollantaytambo is at an elevation above 10,000 feet, so it's very difficult to get metal to melt at that point, so they would have had to have had a portable smelter to do that. And this is the big wall, which is all that's left of the Sun Temple at Ollantaytambo. That man is Jesus Gamarra, who is probably the world's foremost authority on the ancient megalithic works of Cusco and the Sacred Valley. And this is what's interesting. You had these 6 massive slabs, about 40 tons each, and then in between you have these shims. And these shims fit quite tightly in. And the theory is that they were put into place as for earthquake proofing. That when a massive earthquake would run through the area, the shims would run up and down, possibly even in and out, and absorb the shock so that these massive stones would not shift. But then what we see on the side is probably Inca reconstruction of the site, because you see these massive multi-ton blocks kind of stuck in to the side of the wall here, or the hill, and then you have these random, chunks of stone shoved into place. That was not recent reconstruction. There's no reason why the Spanish would have spent any time there, because they more or less banished the local people from any form of worship or occupying or spending time at these megalithic sites. So this is probably Inca period, about 500 or 600 years plus ago.